Feeling kind of poorly today, so I figure it's a good time for a Right to Die video. And nothing makes you more capable of seeing that with clarity, just how wrong our social policy is than when your own addiction, when your own attachment, when your own desire has been tempered or diminished by a little bit of some feeling, some sense, some misery, some thing that gets in its way. It just gets clear. Your mood is more fair. It's as funny as that sounds, because we're so caught up in the chase, in the desire, that we don't really get it. That is maybe the sick state. Maybe that's the state that's the wrong psychology, the broken psychology, and that the fair psychology might be something other than the addictive state. I've sort of made this argument before, but I mean I've analogized our pursuit of this life thing as if it was an addiction, like we were heroin addicts, and the value of the heroin is an illusion. It's created because of a circumstance of our psychology, and there's nothing intrinsically valuable in what we are chasing. We're just chasing this thing called satisfaction, and there's this huge pretense, this obligation to believe, essentially, by the majority, by the common perception, that we all should embrace the heroin. We all should understand and want the heroin, and we all should be caught up in that addiction. And as soon as someone lacks the addiction, they don't have enough desire, then all of a sudden we've decided they're broken, they're wrong, they need fixing, because they don't want enough. And we even, as a society, we've apparently created this very high standard, because even if you have substantial liabilities in your life, substantial miseries or pain, you're supposed to still have so much desire that pain isn't supposed to matter. That no matter what you have to go through, it's supposed to be okay, because you're supposed to want something badly enough to fight through that, and to keep fighting and keep clinging. Most of the psychology is tied up in religion, and that's one of the main reasons why I have such animosity towards religion. It's not because I don't, I have some concern about what other people think or believe. It's not even so much that I know it's fallacy and nonsense, and I'd rather human beings didn't insult our intelligence by clinging to nonsense. But it is this evil part of it, this part of it where they had declared themselves non-delusional, and decide that they can tell everybody else what life is, what it means, that it has a purpose, that we're accomplishing something. And that if we decide to take any control over our own existence, over our own consciousness and its maintenance, and we do that in some manner that isn't approved by their God, that they have a right to tell us, no, we can't do that. That no, we can't use the social infrastructure. No, the society can't be any part of our life anymore. And that we're obliged to go jump in front of traffic, or, shoot ourselves in the head, or do something else. And then the real irony of that is to effectively commit suicide, you're usually going to have to do something rather aggressive to your physical body to cease it to exist in an expedited manner, quickly, so you don't suffer. And then these idiots will sit there and call you violent. They'll insult you. They'll insult who you were as a person. By saying, oh, your psychology was violent. You did a violence against yourself. You hated yourself. I remember 20 years ago having an argument on a radio call-in show because some butthole psychologist was, making this accusation that suicide came at the crux of some, dissatisfaction and violence or some other, but he had to throw this violent word in it because he had to make some kind of little point that somehow the suicidal person doesn't like themselves and that's why they're killing themselves. And it's just, it's just such a cheap shot. It's so superficial. It doesn't really recognize what the real human psychology is made out of, because people really don't want to admit that. They don't want to admit that all they are is desire machines. They want things, and want keeps pushing them forward. And if they don't have enough of that want, well, yes, then these little liabilities of life, the things that some people have to endure, they become harder obstacles to climb over. I mean, you're not going to climb a mountain unless you have desire. You know, you're not going to overcome some obstacle unless there's something motivating you to overcome it. And so they'll sit there and ridicule somebody who lacks desire and say, well, somehow they hate themselves, and that's why they lack desire, or some other bullshit. And it's just that. Look, people kill themselves for a lot of different reasons. Some of them, I would concede, are delusional and superficial. I mean, at least when they articulate them. At least how they articulate them. As stupid as, you know, my hair is too crookedy, or some other bullshit. I think it usually always goes deeper than that. I mean, there is the person has fallen into some trap where either their desire is not strong enough, or their discomfort is too heavy. You know, there's too many liabilities to their existence, or they're facing, you know, the prospect of you know, a mediocrity they just can't endure. But it's not, you know, in a rational society, this would not be an issue. In a society not plagued by archaic rules and a God that can be offended, because that's really what it comes down to. Religious people are offended by people who commit suicide, because that's a rejection of God's creation. And you know, how dare somebody insult the wonderful gift of life? That's how preposterous it is. But the hypocrisy of those people can be seen too, though. Because I remember a case of a guy who was a real religious fanatic. He always preaching when we were kids. You know, he was the father of somebody, but whatever. I mean, he was always such a little nag. I mean, preaching about when you swore, you did something, you did this, and he killed himself. And he did it in a really stupid manner. I mean, he killed himself in his house, and his son found him hanging in the basement. And you're saying, yeah, it was all a lie. He was living a damn lie. And so here he was preaching all this wonderful God's creation bullshit, and shoving it down other people's throats, when the little gears in his own head were having a hard time rationalizing and making meaning out of his own fucking life. And even though he had huge obligations he had committed to, he didn't even have enough strength. He didn't even have enough desire created out of a sense of responsibility to even fulfill those responsibilities before he killed himself. And so, you know, here he was, you know, pointing a finger, and the finger was really just that. It was just a finger. It was an empty finger. There was nothing behind it. No integrity behind it. Just words. Just, yes, life is a gift. Believe it. Okay, but he couldn't logically make that make sense in his own brain. And it's, you know, this is, so it's, look, if you rip the flesh off of us, what are we? Okay, we're just a goddamn flatworm. We're just a bug. Okay, we're this thing wandering through existence, and we have to consume a certain amount of something, you know, to make that possible. And then there's this catch where, you know, the impulse, the design is intended to reproduce. I mean, we can get around that now because we're smart enough to break that part of the physics, but you know, we're still stuck with that design. And to glorify it and to say there's, you know, somebody would have to be somehow psychologically wrong to not be completely motivated is you know, and driven, just completely driven to get past any obstacle, to continue to cling to this thing called life. It's silly. And pragmatically, like I say, if you take religion out of the question, you're left with the reality that the world is chaos. The nature is chaos. It's not going to create the circumstances where every human being will die at the best time or in the best manner. And so without a God to offend, it would only be reasonable that we would act to prevent any extra harm or unnecessary harm. So it's just a rational response to the circumstances. As rational as putting shoes on your feet. I mean, it would be as reasonable as anything else we do to protect ourselves from the realities of life. Building a house and heating it and having running water and having medical care. It would be just as rational as any of those things to control the manner in which we decompose. I mean, our decomposition is just as much a part of our life as the living of it. It's maybe even more important, just because there is so much vulnerability at stake there. There's so much capacity to do so much harm if we don't do something to mitigate against the process of decomposition. And so it's just disappointing that people want to, it's not even that they want to, that they resort to this pettiness.